My name is Gary. I am your host at Mindset Growth Podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. We are looking forward to this next guest. Somebody I've gotten to know in the last year, has a wealth of business experience, has worked with a lot of large companies and primarily in their sales systems. One thing that we often talk about, and especially right now, I think there's a play of words here. We often talk about maybe in a recession or a downed economic time. I like to look at it right now as though we're more or less in a time or a period of inflation. And so it's maybe more a matter of adjusting to a new normal than it is to when there's a recession. It seems companies are pulling back. But what we're really seeing happen here is companies are still growing, doing very well if they're willing to adapt and adjust and really work towards keeping their sales up so that they can continue in a positive fashion. So with that, I want to bring in our next guest, Ken Fisher. Ken, welcome.
Thank you, Gary.
I want to kind of get into your background and your history, and just know that you're similar age as I am. So we can probably go back, and when we talk of one thing that I always thought was interesting was my parents would talk about time periods, and I was always young enough that didn't really make much difference in my life or career. We just tried to adapt and be creative and continue on. One thing that I was too young, I wasn't really working, but I heard a lot about was the inflation days back when Carter was president.
Right.
And as I realized, it probably can create some recession with inflation. Most times it's adapting to that new normal. And I bring that up because you're a sales specialist. That's what you've done is sales, I think, for most of your career. So I feel like the companies that maybe are going to struggle the most are the ones who are not effectively working on marketing and sales and really staying on the forefront. And other companies are maybe becoming more aggressive. And there certainly is an element out there in the marketplace where people are saying, we're going to wait till the prices possibly come back down. But typically in an inflation era, they don't come back down. Everybody just adapts and adjusts because the whole tide goes up with it. So with that, I want to introduce you, and then just tell us a little bit about your background and history in sales so the audience can understand, maybe a little bit from the beginning, how you started and got into it and how you made a career of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually went into college for business management. Spent 3 years at Penn State in State College, PA, and then I transferred to the University of Tennessee to finish up my college career and get my business degree. From there, I entered into the building material space and was fast-tracked as a management candidate within the 84 Lumber chain of stores. Spent some time there, worked my way up through, was trained, and you'll see throughout what I'm about to say that I've had a lot of people invest in me, invest in my training throughout my career, and it's led me to where I am now, where I really want to give back. But I went through 84's training program. I spent some time during the merger of Service Star and True Value to what's now known as TrueServe. Spent some time corporately there within their sales organization. Spent some time with the largest Pella distributor in the country in a sales role. Moved on and spent time with Georgia Pacific. Both Pella and Georgia Pacific invested in my training. And then I just continued on. I worked as an independent sales rep. I got on board with IB Roof Systems in a executive position within the sales group, and was at the CEO, CFO, COO kind of group. And through that, I learned a lot of the behind the scenes and Gary, you talked about inflation and that companies have to adapt. And it caused me to chuckle a bit because there's a saying that, the salespeople will be the ones to turn out the lights because the company can't exist without sales.
Right.
You very rarely see a company cut salespeople or sales positions, I should say. But you do see them cut middle management. You see them cut operations. Um, Sales is the revenue driver.
Right.
And if sales isn't there and if sales isn't prospering, the company doesn't prospect. And that's why, during these times that you've described, it's more important than ever to
Right.
invest in your sales team.
So one thing that's interesting that I noted from what you've just mentioned is that a lot of people invested in you, and it was your employers as you went throughout your career. Uh, those people did that expecting a return. They didn't just invest in you, but they invested in others, and they understand that importance of training and development. And certainly some people will move on. Some people may move on to competitors, but they understand that investment and the return on it. So we serve and have a lot of audience that fits a smaller business model than say 84 Lumber and True Value and Pella and some of those. But the thing that not only couples with the fact of the employer investing in you, one thing, and I want your perspective on this, one thing I find very interesting, I feel like it's hard for a small business to get their mind around developing a really true sales department. I feel like the owner thinks he has been able to start this business and through connections and service or whatever they did, that's what's going to continue to attract new business. But there's only a demographic that you can actually have that one-on-one relationship with until you have to start to bring in more people and set up more of a process-driven, process-driven process in order to continue to drive sales. What are some of your thoughts, or how have you seen that be the case?
I think the thing that I see the most, and I think it exists more in the small to medium sized companies, is that salespeople and the ownership, because normally you're talking about a privately owned company at that size,
Right.
They see sales as a role and not as a profession. And as I've gone through it, I've come to realize that when I ask people, what are you doing to improve upon your profession? And they say, what do you mean? And I say, well, are you studying your trade? How are you getting better at what you do? And it's rare that you find someone who has taken that upon themselves to go out and to find resources and to learn, to perfect their craft within the sales trade, within the sales industry. And so as I'm talking to business owners and salespeople, what I commonly find is that they work harder. How do you grow your sales? Well, I work harder. Well, hard work is certainly one of the components for success, but without the training, without the skill set that you need and honing those skills, it becomes a very limiting prospect. You can only grow so much through effort. You have to become good at what you do as well. And so as I'm going through some of the sessions that I do with people, it's like a light goes off as I'm starting to explain some of the sales techniques and some of the, this is a mindset growth podcast, some of the mindset that you have to have
Right.
to actually go out and be that professional salespeople. And salespeople are the highest paid people in most companies. I mean, a good owner won't care if his salespeople are making a lot of money.
Right.
And if you're really excellent at what you do, you can be one of those high earners.
Right. There's a couple of things that catch my attention there. One, I guess, is I'm assuming that a lot of the people you work with, I mean, if they view it as a profession and not a position, I mean, I guess that's one discernment. I like how you laid that out. That's huge. I think most of them clearly look at that as no different than the bookkeeper, the whatever other position there is. And the other piece of being a high earner, then there also needs to be a scale to where these salespeople really feel like they've got unlimited potential.
Correct.
And I feel like too often I see people wanting to limit that position because we need profits.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not trying to balance how the whole organization and the cash flows from the top to the bottom through that organization to where it can motivate and fill a lot of those slots. There are times I will see companies do that very well, and you'll see people all the way through that scale through KPIs or whatever method they use, being able to adjust their income. But the salespeople, without a doubt, need to have a lot of motivation. They're usually pretty ego driven and aggressive people. And if they feel like they've been limited, what I see often, they will limit themselves because they don't even, they need that motivation. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think you've experienced this with people, and we've talked about it, but I've had salespeople when I've been coaching them say, well, how much money can you make in sales? And I'll say, well, how much do you want to make? And they kind of look at me confused. And I say, well, if you tell me what you want to make, and we start to look at some of the activities that you do and what your success rate is in those activities, we can start to work the numbers backwards, and I can pretty much tell you what you're going to have to do every day to achieve what you want to achieve. But most people don't take the time to work through that.
Right.
You know, you ask them, how are you going to get to where you want to go? And they say, well, I hope I have a better year this year than I had last year. Well, you know, we've talked, hope is not a strategy, right?
No.
So yeah, it's interesting when people engage and they take the time and make the investment to receive sales training, the different aspects of sales and psychology and the way it all weaves together. It really creates a roadmap for success. And
Right.
if you don't have that roadmap, you're just wandering around out there every day, just doing your best, but not really being as effective as you could be.
Right. I think the challenge with the small to mid-sized companies, what are some of your suggestions you would give them to start to change the philosophy? Because we will also work with companies at times where they've got a friend that they know and they think he'd make a good salesperson. They put him into this slot. He's not quite doing what they need him to do, but now it's created another dynamic. So when you're going to fill this position, it's different than if you're going to create basically careers for people. So they're needing somebody probably to start with in their mind just to take orders, but sales is much more than just going out, maintaining a relationship and taking orders. What is some advice you would give that small business owner to shift their perspectives and really build a solid sales team?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a misnomer that there's a certain personality type that can be successful in sales. And the truth is, multiple personality types can be effective in sales. Just like you have salespeople with different personalities, you have customers with different personalities. And it's more about how you're able to adapt to others' personalities and be effective with them, than it is finding that perfect customer or thinking your salesperson has to be this exact personality type. I think key is to do a disc assessment when you're looking to hire someone and really have an understanding of their personality, because you're going to need to nurture them in how they can be effective as a salesperson. So I think that's a key. I learned a long time ago to hire the person, not the skill set, because you can teach skills. You can't change someone's personality, just a wholesale person. It's hard to change someone's motivation.
Right.
You can't teach motivation, right? You can't teach drive. But you can teach a skill set.
What are some key things that a business owner should be looking for in a person to, if they want to hire and really do? Because I know it can take different personalities. Does it take somebody who just is high energy, somebody who has very disciplined, somebody who has a high drive to succeed?
Yeah, all of those things. And we always liked people that were married and had a lot of kids,
So
because they had responsibility and they had a lot of financial responsibility as well. Not just personal responsibility, but the financial responsibility, and that naturally creates a drive for success.
Right.
And
go ahead.
I was going to say, I hate to put a box around a person like that, but yeah, desperation creates motivation in a lot of cases.
Right. No, I've got a relative who has a larger roofing company, and he always says, once you can hire somebody, but once they have the first or second child and reality sets in that they're now the responsible party, he said it's a game changer. And that's what he always looks for, is people with families. He knows their motivation will be different, and he's probably got a good 15, 20-year period that they're going to be strongly motivated.
Right. Yeah, boats are the same way, right? If somebody owns a boat, you got them for a while too, because that's expensive. But yeah, that's what I would look for. I'd look for somebody that has good interpersonal skills, somebody that'll look you in the eye when they talk to you. Skill sets vary. I have somebody right now that I'm working with, and they have a background in the production of the service and product that they sell, and now they're moving into sales. And I said, you're not going to be the most refined salesperson, but the value that you bring in understanding the process is where you want to focus your communications with your customer, because you'll be able to put them at ease with exactly what's going to happen during the process. And, a salesperson that doesn't have that production background, they don't know all that.
Right.
They're going to focus more on product, or, the history of the company, or whatever the case may be. So each person brings a different skill set, but it's the interpersonal skills. It's the willingness to engage in a conversation face to face, not just texting people or sending emails, but face to face with eye contact, and being able to present a message.
Right. So one thing I seem to have crossed paths with very often is you'll get people that do those things, but they struggle to close the deal.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, is that something that's more trained, or are there some people that just with life experience are more timid and it's hard for them to go in for the kill?
Sure. Yeah. There are some people that they try to close you right after they say hi, and they don't stop. And, some of those people maybe give salespeople a bad name because they're a little too aggressive. But Yeah, I think it's a trained skill, and I think with the consultative sales approach that we coach or that I coach, um, you learn how to walk a customer through the process, and there's trial closes along the way, but basically you're learning to swallow your pride, swallow your salesman, I guess, aggressiveness, work with the customer, ask them questions, give up a little bit of control during the sales process, knowing that you can reel it back in, you have that confidence, but you're really helping the customer make their own decision. And you want them to sense that that's the best decision that they've ever made and that it was their decision, their idea.
Right.
If it's done correctly, the close is just a natural conclusion to the process. It's not something where you have to aggressively try close number 6 off the list, and
Right.
some people have these fancy closes with crazy names to them, and if you're trying to trick a customer into buying from you, you probably haven't done your job.
You often hear the saying that people do business with people they know and like. And probably 35 years ago, at least, I read Zig Ziglar's book on selling. And the one thing that stuck out, and it was just Ziglar on selling. That was the title of the book. I've read it many times. And there weren't the resources there are today. But the one thing that stuck out to me that you had to ask the customer for the sale 4 times in order to get them to close. So in the beginning of my career, would ask people, "You're here to buy a car today." Well, if I got a no, I already screwed myself out of possibly taking them down the road.
Right.
Where I learned if you can build that relationship with them and figure out what it is they need and what they're looking for, it really worked a lot better. And it's not Zig's fault. It was my interpretation of it. I'm leaving a lot of what he said out, but that was how I viewed it. So I was going to get the first one out immediately and then get to the second and third, because in 15 minutes, I wanted the fourth time so I could close. And it became a high pressure with little emotion and feeling involved. But it comes back to something you mentioned earlier. As long as I kept my activities up, even as a complete rookie, my numbers were good.
Sure.
But once I honed those other skills, I could go from a 25% close rate to an 80% close rate. And it was a total different experience, because then you could start to bring in repeat customers and things like that. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about, is not the high pressure side of it. Try to build out where you're really trying to fit what it is that they need and finding the best solution. Because we've all probably been with companies sometimes we get involved with. And for anyone listening to this, sometimes they may need a product that you don't even offer. And it may be to your benefit to connect them with the right person and the right product, rather than to go ahead and push the wrong product into their possession. And it comes with maturity as we sort through all of those experiences, for sure.
Separately, I'm Gage.
And I'm Bontrager.
Together, we are Gage Bontrager Consulting.
We work on changing your mindset,
Developing leaders,
building systems and processes,
helping you grow personally and professionally
to achieve the success that you want personally and professionally.
however you choose to define success for you.
Reach out to us and follow us on social media, or look us up on the website, and that will put you on a path to achieve what is missing in your life.
Thanks for watching this episode of Mindset Growth Podcast.
One other thing I'd like to go back to, I run into small and mid-sized business owners when they get to the point of they're building out a sales team. And you had mentioned that when a company needs to downsize and make adjustments, the salespeople are the last to go. And there may be more pressure for performance out of the salespeople at that point. There may be a little more scrutiny, but other positions will roll first. I hear sometimes coming from business owners, but if we put on these salespeople, we won't be able to keep up with the production side. And I think as a small business owner that maybe started and did the sales, did the production, went through the whole process, likes to think that we know exactly how we're going to do this to service the customer. But in that sales process, as long as there's good communication, I think a lot of times a client is not going to be totally disappointed and say no, because let's say the wait time is 4 months instead of 2, or 6 instead of 3. There's good communication and processes. It's again back to where the trust lies with the client. I guess what's some of your thoughts on that? Because it clearly tells me when you made that statement that those companies understand the importance of sales, and they're going to make other adjustments everywhere else before they start cutting back on the sales side. And yet a lot of businesses that are small and mid-size are heavy on the service and production and really light on the sales. And once you want to scale past a certain point, you have to bring in your sales. So what are some thoughts you have on that?
Oh, there's so much there. I would say the best problem a company can have is to have long lead times because their production board's full.
Okay.
Does a couple things. One, until you start losing customers because of your lead time isn't too long. It's tolerable, right?
Okay.
And some of that may have to do with market influences. It may have to do with just your ability to turn work.
Right.
The power that gives you as a company then is to impress upon your salespeople that they need to charge more. So when your lead times are long, when your production schedule is full, you're not begging for work. You're not cutting prices to get jobs just to keep the line busy or to keep production busy.
Right.
You can actually increase your margins, take the work you want to take, and leave the work you don't want for your competitors. So it's a very, very powerful position to be in. And if you talk to companies during COVID, when that scenario existed virtually everywhere, and allocation was the word of the day for a lot of companies, they were trying to figure out how to exist in perpetual allocation.
Right.
Because it's profitable. So, yeah, I would tell your salespeople, outsell us, because, it leads to higher margins. There's opportunities out there everywhere to outsource things that you need done, either to create efficiencies within your business or just to subcontract work out to people who may not be as busy.
Right.
Keep selling.
Right.
Sell when you're busy, sell when you're not busy, sell all the time.
Well, the other aspect I see with that too, I think often they kind of go in cycles, because some of these companies are going to sell more in their off season, and then some people will bleed back over into production. Once you fill that pipeline, like what you're talking about, it really helps them being able to develop a complete system, and they'll find their efficiencies go up with that tremendously when they do that. So
absolutely.
That's for sure. Couple of the things I want to talk about as well, so that people understand this. You also do sales training one-on-one. I know with companies, you'll come in and do events. You've got what you call intensives. I think there's 7 of them. And would you just give us the topics of those 7 and talk us a little bit about through what that looks like when you come in and help a company with those intensives?
Yeah, absolutely. And these intensives can be taken in sequence. They can be a la carte if you feel like there's one specific area of sales that your sales force needs help with. But a kind of a natural flow, if you were going to look to engage in all seven, would be prospecting. And I kind of summarized the titles, but prospecting, unique selling proposition, understanding personality types, consultative selling, questioning techniques, overcoming objections, and decoding buying signals. So within each of those, without going in too deep, I'll just give a little synopsis. Prospecting is exactly what it sounds like, right? And it's understanding how to prospect. It's understanding when to prospect. It's understanding how to fill that pipeline. It's prospecting when you're busy. It's prospecting when you're not busy, to avoid those ups and downs, those gaps in your sales. It's understanding your numbers,
Right.
understanding your close rate and how your close rate and your activities go hand in hand to produce results. The unique selling proposition, this is something that a lot of companies and individuals never explore and never put down on paper, but it's what separates you as a salesperson from the salespeople that you compete against. It's what separates your company from the people your company competes against. It's understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and then the threats and opportunities that exist out there. It's interesting as I've been going through some of these with groups, and we talked about sales being a profession, unique selling proposition. I said, there's a salesperson that I consider a mentor, and I would never want to sell against him. And I'm glad that we're friends because I don't sell against him very often. But if I were to go against him, he would win about 80% of the time. And so as I'm training salespeople, I say, well, what if you were going against me?
Right.
And they look at me and they're like, oh man, I guess I got some work to do, and that's why you need to become a professional at what you do.
Right.
But understanding your unique selling proposition helps you to position yourself against your competitors. Understanding personality types. Every salesperson and every customer has their own personality type. And sometimes those personality types marry up well together, and sometimes they don't. And it's knowing how to structure around the areas of conflict within personalities and take advantage of the similarities within the personalities. Consultative selling, we touched on it a little bit, but it's a lot about helping the customer understand what their wants and needs are and asking questions, which is the next session, is questioning techniques, but asking questions that help lead them down the path to explore exactly what they want and to gain agreement along the way. You talked about, trying to close 4 times before you close. Well, another technique is to gain agreement on things that may or may not be relevant to the sale at all, but it gets the person thinking yes or saying yes. They're hearing themselves agree, and then they become more agreeable throughout the process. You can't be successful in a sales environment if you're putting a person in a position to say no, 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 and then at the end asking them to say yes. It's not going to go well for you. So that leads into questioning techniques. And boy, I've had salespeople that I've trained, and I've asked them to come up with some questions to ask. And I'd be on a sales call with them, and they would ask the best question I've ever heard in my life. And they'd get the greatest answer that was going to lead them down the path to getting the sale. And then they'd ask a completely unrelated question. another great question, but it had no flow. It
Right.
had no direction. And so in the questioning technique session, the intensive, we talk about how to sequence questions to get to where you want to go, and the different types of questions that you can ask to get there, and when to use the different types of questions. So that's a critical one as well. Overcoming objections, I love it. I tell people that if somebody's not objecting, they're not interested.
Right.
You've completely lost it. Overcoming objections. If you get an objection, that's actually a buying signal.
Okay.
Because it's that customer is trying to justify in their mind how to get past whatever concern that they have in that moment.
Right.
And they want you to go down that path with them to figure it out. So that's objections are buying signals.
Okay.
I mean, it's a tremendously powerful perspective on objections, because most people hear an objection and they think they've failed
Right.
somehow to get their message across. And then last is decoding buying signals. It's knowing when to close. It's understanding when that customer is ready to make that final decision.
Right.
So those are the 7, kind of in a nutshell.
Okay. And those are really all things that are either part of the pipeline as you go through the process of activities, or techniques that you work with a lot to make all the difference. I will say there were times I remember being surprised when a customer committed and said yes, when they would let me know that they've always worked with a different company and a different salesperson. And I would back down and just be courteous because I didn't expect a sale.
Mm-hmm.
So I would answer all their questions. And what I learned from that approach years ago was that was their personality. They had always dealt with this other person, but this other person evidently was not completely setting with them. In my young career, I didn't understand, if they always bought from them, they wouldn't have been talking to me to start with. But here they were, and it was a surprise to me that they flipped and did business with me in place of the person they had for a number of years. So there's a lot to decoding those signals that people are leaving. And it was just, some of those things are so valuable to know, and it'll help the transaction go smoother. Another thing I know you do is basically it's a sales peer group, but it's just a group for small companies that have a smaller number of salespeople, to where it's difficult maybe to have a sales team and a larger meeting and have all the training and things that maybe that a larger company can do. You will blend a couple companies together and do that together. Can you talk about that just for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think this has value, just like we have peer groups, or you might be involved in a Bible study or a men's group through church, or something like that. To have people that are like-minded or have some commonality, they're up against some of the same challenges you are, and really looking for guidance. They're looking for someone to come alongside them and share in the victories and the challenges along the way. And when we talk about a sales peer group, sales, and we talk about personalities, sales is a rejection. There's a lot of rejection along the way. And to have people that you can talk through that with is helpful. And I'm not saying, we're going to be laying on couches psychoanalyzing each other, but I think to give each other support, and to look at challenges or failures and say, what could I have done differently? If you have the humility to come into the group and open up and say, what could I have done differently? And it not only helps the person who may have had that challenge or failure, but it helps others to avoid those same pitfalls. And so during these sessions, my vision of it is that we would have an introduction period where we kind of go over what's happened in the last week. What are some things, some victories or some challenges? We'll go into a little bit of an educational segment where maybe I'll tee up a topic for the day. And then I really want the group to participate and talk about shared experience, because, I could come in and I could talk for 2 hours, but I think there's a lot more value in having the collective minds in the room share their experiences and case studies, what they did in certain situations that worked or didn't work. And, I'm certainly there to keep the conversation in bounds and to provide guidance or thoughts along the way of, things that I've experienced as well.
Right. I just find it unique because I think a lot of companies that are going to have, let's say, 1 or 2 salespeople, and they're going to experience a lot of the same things. And one question I have, though, with you, sometimes you hear people say, well, we're plumbers and what we do is different and nobody understands that. Or, we're in automotive repair and that's what we do is a little different than what everybody else does. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of small business owners in their mind create the perception they do something different than somebody else because, yes, they may provide better quality workmanship than one down the street in their mind, and it may be a reality. But at the end of the day, the sales piece of working with all these companies, do you find it beneficial, or does it not really matter if we got somebody who's doing roofing, somebody who's doing plumbing, somebody who's in automotive? I mean, they're all still coming back to working with people and personalities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any time that you have a small group that is very defined, you risk a myopic or a groupthink situation. And you see this in corporate boardrooms all the time.
Yes.
And, somebody from the outside looks in and they're like, what are you guys doing? So I think absolutely having different perspectives from different industries or trades or whatever the case may be, some things are very common within certain industries and not in others, and they are very interchangeable, but you may never have been exposed to it because you're exposed to what's common within the box that you're in.
Right. I just throw that out there because I don't know who all is going to be listening to this. And I know there's sometimes we as humans get caught up in this whole uniqueness of what we're doing. And it causes us to just be oblivious to the obvious. And it's really can help, I think, understand even maybe some of our clients if there's different trades that are working together in those environments. But I think it's a great idea of what you're doing, working with that in a peer group setting, blending different companies together. The things that companies experience will all be the same. They're going to experience the rejection. They're going to experience, delays in getting product. Weather can be a problem. There's a lot of things that can play into this, and those things will all overlap, certainly. Any thoughts you want to leave with an audience?
I would just say work on your trade. I mean, sales can be fun. It can be exciting. You have goals that you're up against, obviously, but I always told people, you're going to have your goals for me, but I'm going to have my own goals.
Right.
And I think if you continuously invest in yourself, people are going to see the potential in you, and they're going to put you in a position to succeed. They're going to give you those opportunities, and success breeds success.
Right.
There's no better time to sell your next job or your next project or whatever business you're in than the minute you close your last one.
Right.
You're on a high, you're rolling, and you want to take advantage of that. So Yeah, work on your skills. It's don't let people tell you, oh, you're just a salesperson,
Right.
because it's a tremendous profession. And I also would say I like it a lot more than sales management. I was in sales management, and that is a whole new set of burdens that I felt relieved to have removed myself from when I
Right.
got back into sales directly. And that was very freeing for me to be able to take all of my sales and sales management skills and just roll it up
Right.
into going out and helping customers understand their needs and wants.
Right. I would just, if you're a business owner listening to this, really consider reaching out and having a conversation with Ken. We'll have his email, and you can get him on LinkedIn and I think some other social media platforms, but just have a conversation with him and be a little bit open-minded about this. Too often, I believe the fear that we have of being able to keep up with production, I hear that so many times. It's usually much bigger fear because in your mind, you're telling yourself, we always do this way. And there may be people that don't want that service provided right away. They just know they need to have it taken care of. They need to work within budgets, and things got to happen in another, say, fiscal quarter or year. But don't limit yourself due to what you think your production capabilities are. If you want to sustain, much less really grow a company and help people reach their potential and find out what they're created for, go ahead and build that sales team. It'll revolutionize the opportunities that people have. It'll increase your pay scales for all of your employees, and you can serve more people. If you truly believe, as a business owner, that you guys provide a better service than the HVAC shop down the door, then it is your responsibility, I would argue, that you put the systems and processes in place to serve more people. That way the others don't have that bad experience. With that, thank you, Ken, for joining us here on Mindset Growth Podcast. I really appreciate it. There's so many things in sales that are just key in life in general, and I think you covered a lot of those just with being tied in even on personal levels with local church groups, men's groups, things like that. And appreciate your time doing that, and look forward to crossing paths with you again. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.